incredible day. And last night, the Republican Party defied history to expand our Senate majority while significantly beating expectations in the House for the midterm and midterm year. We did this in spite of a very dramatic fundraising disadvantage driven by Democrats' wealthy donors and special interests and very hostile media coverage, to put it mildly. The media coverage set a new record and a new standard. We also had a staggering number of House retirements, so it's a little tough. These are seats that could have been held pretty easily, and we had newcomers going in, and a lot of them worked very hard, but it's very difficult when you have that many retirements. We held a large number of campaign rallies with large numbers of people going to everyone. To the best of my knowledge, we didn't have a vacant or an empty seat. I'm sure you would have reported it if you spotted one, including 30 rallies in the last 60 days. And we saw the candidates that I supported achieve tremendous success last night. As an example of the 11 candidates we campaigned with during the last week, 9 won last night. This vigorous campaigning stopped the blue wave that they talked about. I don't know if there ever was such a thing, but could have been. If we didn't do the campaigning, probably there could have been. And the history really will see what a good job we did in the final couple of weeks in terms of getting some tremendous people over the finish line. They really are tremendous people, but many of them were not known, but they will be known. This election marks the largest Senate gains for a president's party in a first midterm election since at least President Kennedy's in 1962. There have been only 4 midterm elections since 1934 in which a president's party has gained even a single Senate seat. As of now, we picked up, it looks like 3, could be 4, perhaps it could be 2, but we picked up a lot. And most likely the number will be 3. You people probably know that better than I do at this point because you've looked at the more recent numbers. 55 is the largest number of Republican senators in the last 100 years. In the last 80 years, a sitting president's party has only gained a cumulative total of 8 Senate seats, averaging 1 per decade. So if we picked up 2, 3, or 4, that's a big percentage of that number. So in the last 80 years, you think of that, only 8 seats. In President Obama's first midterm election, he lost 6 Senate seats, including in the deep blue state of Massachusetts. Republicans captured at least 4 Senate seats held by Democrat incumbents. And these are tremendously talented, hardworking people that did this. Indiana, North Dakota, Florida, Missouri. We also won 2 open Senate seats in Tennessee. I want to congratulate our great champion who did such a great job in Tennessee, Marcia. And in Utah. And Arizona is looking very good, really very good. She's done a terrific job. That was a tough race, and she's done a fantastic job. In each of these open seats, Democrats recruited very strong candidates with substantial fundraising and media support. We were getting bombarded with money on the other side. In the House, Republicans dramatically outperformed historical precedents and overcame a historic number of retirements, the most House Republican retirements in 88 years. 43 House Republicans retired. Now, I will say this, that in many cases they were chairmen of committees, and they left because they weren't chairmen, because the Republicans have a rule for 6 years. And what that does is wonderful in one way. It lets people come through the system and become chairman, and another way it drives people out. Because when they're a chairman, they don't want to go and not be a chairman. You're the chairman of a committee, and you're a big deal, and all of a sudden, you're not doing that anymore. So they leave. We had a lot of them leave. It's, I guess you can flip a coin as to which system is better. The Democrats do the other. Some of their folks have been on those committees for a long time as chairman. In 2010, President Obama's first midterm, he lost 63 seats. By contrast, as of the most current count, looks like around 27 House seats or something, and we'll figure that out pretty soon. We also had a slew of historic wins in the governor's races. The governor's races were incredible, against very well-funded, talented, and skilled Democrat candidates and people that worked very, very hard, respectfully, for those candidates, like Oprah Winfrey, who I like. I don't know if she likes me anymore, but that's okay. She used to. But she worked very hard in Georgia, very, very hard. And if you look at them, with 4 governor's races crucial to 2020 and the presidential race: Florida, Iowa, Ohio, and Georgia. The big ones: Florida, Iowa, Ohio, and Georgia. Can't get much more important than that. They were incredible. They were actually incredible campaigns, too. Incredible. As of right now, Republicans will control the majority of governorships across the country, including 3 great women who worked very hard, governors of Alabama, South Dakota, and Iowa. They worked very, very hard. They're very talented. By expanding our Senate majority, the voters have also clearly rebuked the Senate Democrats for their handling of the Kavanaugh hearings. That was a factor, I think maybe a very big factor. The way that was handled, I think, was tremendous energy was given to the Republican Party by the way they treated then Judge Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, and expressed their support for confirming more great pro-Constitution judges. Candidates who embraced our message of low taxes, low regulations, low crime, strong borders, and great judges excelled last night. They excelled. They really, I mean, we have a list of people that were fantastic. And I'm just going to point them out. Mike Bost, Rodney Davis, Andy Barr was fantastic. I went to Kentucky. For the most part, I didn't campaign for the House, but I did actually make a special trip for Andy Barr because he was in a very tough race in Kentucky, and he won. That was a very tough race. The polls were all showing that he was down, and down substantially, and he won. And that one I did do. Pete Stauber of Minnesota, great guy, he's new, and ran a fantastic race. On the other hand, you had some that decided to, let's stay away. Let's stay away. They did very poorly. I'm not sure that I should be happy or sad, but I feel just fine about it. Carlos Cubella, Mike Kaufman. Too bad, Mike. Mia Love. I saw Mia Love. She'd call me all the time to help her with a hostage situation, being held hostage in Venezuela. But Mia Love gave me no love, and she lost. Too bad. Sorry about that, Mia. And Barbara Comstock was another one. I mean, I think she could have won that race, but she didn't want to have any embrace. For that, I don't blame her. But she lost, substantially lost. Peter Roskam didn't want the embrace. Eric Paulson didn't want the embrace. And in New Jersey, I think he could have done well, but didn't work out too good. Bob Eugen, I feel badly because I think that's something that could have been won. That's a race that could have been won. John Faso, those are some of the people that, decided for their own reason not to embrace whether it's me or what we stand for, but what we stand for meant a lot to most people. And we've had tremendous support, and tremendous support in the Republican Party, among the biggest support in the history of the party. I've actually heard at 93% it's a record, but I won't say that because who knows. But we've had tremendous support. America is booming like never before, doing fantastic. We have Larry Kudlow here, and he said the numbers are as good as he's ever seen numbers at any time for our country. But he's a young man, so he hasn't seen that many numbers. Where's Larry? You're a young man, right, Larry? And you haven't been doing this too long, but they're as good as you've ever seen. And we may have, if you have a question for Larry, we'll do that. But I want to send my warmest appreciation and regards to Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. We really worked very well together. We have been working very well together. We actually have a great relationship. People just don't understand that, which is fine. And also to perhaps, looks like, I would think, Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And I give her a lot of credit. She works very hard, and she's worked long and hard. I give her a great deal of credit for what she's done and what she's accomplished. Hopefully we can all work together next year to continue delivering for the American people, including on economic growth, infrastructure, trade, lowering the cost of prescription drugs. These are some of the things that the Democrats do want to work on, and I really believe we'll be able to do that. I think we're going to have a lot of reason to do it. And I will say, just as a matter of business, I was with some very successful people last night. We were watching the returns. So if the Republicans won, and let's say we held on by 2 or 1 or 3, it would have been very hard out of that many Republicans to ever even get support among Republicans, because there'll always be 1 or 2 or 3 people that, for good reason or for bad reason or for grandstanding, we have that too. You've seen that. You've seen that, plenty of grandstanding. But for certain reasons, that many people, you're always going to have a couple that won't do it. So that puts us in a very bad position. In other words, had we kept, and this is no, I'm saying this for a very basic reason, it's common sense. It puts us in a very tough position. We win by 1 or 2 or 3, and you'll have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 even come over and say, you know, look, we're not going to go along with this. We want this, and all of a sudden we wouldn't even be able to get it in many cases out of the Republicans' hands before we sent it on to the Senate. And now we have a much easier path, because the Democrats will come to us with a plan for infrastructure, a plan for health care, a plan for whatever they are looking at, and we'll negotiate. And as you know, it's been very hard in the Senate because we need essentially 10 votes from Democrats, and we don't get those votes because the Democrats do really stick together well. I don't agree with them on a lot of policy, but I agree with them on sticking together. They stick together great. So now we go into the Senate. We don't have the 10 votes. And what happens? It doesn't get passed. Even if it gets out of the House, it doesn't get passed. So under the new concept of what we're doing, I say, come on, let me see what you have. They want to do things. You know, I keep hearing about investigations, fatigue. Like almost from the time I announced I was going to run, they've been giving us this investigation fatigue. It's been a long time. They got nothing, 0. You know why? Because there is nothing. But they can play that game, but we can play it better, because we have a thing called the United States Senate, and a lot of very questionable things were done between leaks of classified information and many other elements that should not have taken place. And all you're going to do is end up in back and forth and back and forth, and 2 years is going to go up, and we won't have done a thing. I really think, and I really respected what Nancy said last night about bipartisanship and getting together and uniting. She used the word uniting, and she used the bipartisanship statement, which is so important because that's what we should be doing. So we can look at us, they can look at us, and then we can look at them, and it'll go back and forth, and it'll probably be very good for me politically. I could see it being extremely good politically, because I think I'm better at that game than they are, actually. But we'll find out. I mean, you know, we'll find out. Or we can work together. You can't do them simultaneously, by the way, just in case somebody says, oh, you can do them both. No, you can't. Because if they're doing that, we're not doing the other, just so you understand. So we won't be doing that. But now what happens is we send it to the Senate, and we'll get 100% Democrat support, and we'll get some Republican support. And if it's good, I really believe we have Republicans that will help with the approval process, and they will really help with the approval process. So it really could be a beautiful bipartisan type of situation. If we won by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, that wouldn't happen. And the closer it is, the worse it is. This way, they'll come to me, we'll negotiate, maybe we'll make a deal, maybe we won't. That's possible. But we have a lot of things in common on infrastructure. We want to do something on health care. They want to do something on health care. There are a lot of great things that we can do together. And now we'll send it up, and we will really we'll get the Democrats, and we'll get the Republicans or some of the Republicans. And I'll make sure that we send something up that the Republicans can support. And they're going to want to make sure they send something up that the Democrats can support. So our great country is booming like never before, and we're thriving on every single level, both in terms of economic and military strength, in terms of development, in terms of GDP, we're doing unbelievably. I will tell you our trade deals are coming along fantastically. The USMCA and South Korea is finished. USMCA has gotten rave reviews. We're not going to lose companies anymore to other countries. They're not going to do that because they have a tremendous economic incentive, meaning it's prohibitive for them to do that. So it's not going to be like NAFTA, which is one of the worst deals I've ever seen, although we've made some other pretty bad ones too. Now is the time for members of both parties to join together, put partisanship aside, and keep the American economic miracle going strong. It is a miracle. We're doing so well. And I've said it at a lot of rallies. Some of you have probably heard it so much you don't want to hear it again. But when people come to my office, presidents, prime ministers, they all congratulate me almost the first thing on what we've done economically, because it is really amazing. And our steel industry is back. Our aluminum industry is starting to do really well. These are industries that were dead. Our miners are working again. We must all work together to protect our military. We have to do that. To support our law enforcement, secure our borders, and advance really great policy, including environmental policy. We want crystal clean water. We want beautiful, perfect air. Air and water has to be perfect. At the same time, we don't want to put ourselves at a disadvantage to other countries who are very competitive with us and who don't abide by the rules at all. We don't want to hurt our jobs. We don't want to hurt our factories. We don't want companies leaving. We want to be totally competitive, and we are. And right now we have just about the cleanest air, the cleanest water we've ever had, and it's always going to be that way. We insist on it. So environmental is very important to me. And with that, I'll take a few questions if you'd like. Whoa. I didn't know what happened. All right, go ahead, John. That was a lot of hand shooting up so quickly. There's a lot to talk about.
Mr. President, you talked at length just now about bipartisanship. The presumed Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, talked about it last night. I'm sure that's encouraging for the American people. But do you really believe, given what the relationship has been like between this White House and the Democratic Party, that that will happen?
I think there's a good chance. I think there's a very good chance.
If I could just finish,
it will happen.
Will you have to compromise on certain issues to the point where it could hurt you in 2020? And do you expect that when the Democrats take over the chairmanship of all these important committees, you're going to get hit with a blizzard of subpoenas on everything from the Russia investigation to your cell phone use to your tax returns?
Ready? Then you're going to, if that happens, then we're going to do the same thing, and government comes to a halt. And I would blame them because they now are going to be coming up with policy. They're the majority in the House. I expect that they will come up with some fantastic ideas that I can support on the environment, on so many different things, including prescription drug prices, which we've made a big dent in already, including some of the things that we're working on for the vets. We've gotten choice approved. We've got a lot of things approved, but they have some other elements that we want. There are many things we can get along on without a lot of trouble, that we agree very much with them and they agree with us. I would like to see bipartisanship. I'd like to see unity. And I think we have a very good chance of, and maybe not on everything, but I think we have a very good chance of seeing that. Go ahead.
One question on the lame duck, sir, and one on your cabinet. You toyed with the idea during the campaign of a shutdown before the midterms in order to secure border wall funding. Are you prepared to go on a shutdown strategy during the lame duck, since this might be your last best chance?
Not necessarily
to secure that.
Sense. Look, I speak to Democrats all the time. They agree that a wall is necessary. A wall is necessary. And as you know, we're building the wall. We've started, but we should build it at one time, not in chunks.
But you want much more money, and you want much sooner.
No, we need the money to build the wall, the whole wall, not pieces of it all over. And we are doing it. Now we have the military. Now we have other elements of a wall that are pretty nasty, to be honest with you, but nevertheless, it's pretty hard to get through it. But no, I'd like to see the wall. Many of the people that we'll be dealing with, in 2006, they approved the wall, essentially. It was a very strong border fence, but it was the same thing. And they all approved it. They all agreed. I have statements from every one of them. We have them saying, we need the wall. I mean, they sound like me. Mm-hmm. But we do need it because we have people coming, and I'm not just talking about the caravans. We have people coming through our border that you physically can't put that many people. It's a 2,000-mile stretch. You can't put that many people along that stretch to guard it. And even if you did, tremendous fighting would ensue. So we need the wall. Many Democrats know we need the wall. And we're just going to have to see what happens. I mean, I will be fighting for it. They have done everything in their power to make sure. I got the military, $700 billion and $716 billion. The wall is a tiny, tiny fraction of the cost of that. But their whole agenda has been to try not giving me anything for the wall. I really believe politically they're hurting themselves. I actually think politically that's a good thing for me, but I want to get the wall up because we need it.
So no shutdown scenario?
I don't know. I can't tell you that. No, I can't commit to that, but it's possible.
And can you give us clarity, sir, on your thinking currently, now after the midterms, about your Attorney General and your Deputy Attorney General? Do they have long-term job security?
I'd rather answer that at a little bit different time. We're looking at a lot of different things, including cabinet. I'm very happy with most of my cabinet. We're looking at different people for different positions. It's very common after the midterms. I didn't want to do anything before the midterms. But I will tell you that, for the most part, I'm extremely happy with my cabinet. I think Mike Pompeo has fit in so beautifully. He's done an incredible job.
How about your Interior Secretary?
We're looking at that, and I do want to study whatever is being said.
Is he in jeopardy?
I think he's doing an excellent job. But we will take a look at that in a very strong, and we'll probably have an idea about that in about a week.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Wow, this is... Go ahead, John. He gave me a fair interview the other day, so I might as well ask him a question.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. And picking up there, you told me the other day that you are an open book. So
I think I am an open book.
So point blank, Democrats go after your tax returns. Will you try to block that, or will you allow them to have them?
Well, look, as I've told you, they're under audit. They have been for a long time. They're extremely complex. People wouldn't understand them. They're done by among the biggest and best law firms in the country. Same thing with the accounting firms. The accountants are a very, very large, powerful firm from the standpoint of respect. They're highly respected. Big firm. A great law firm, or you know it very well. They do these things. They put them in. But people don't understand tax returns. Now, I did do a filing of over 100 pages, I believe, which is in the offices. And when people went and saw that filing and they saw the magnitude of it, they were very disappointed. And they saw the detail. You'd get far more from that. And I guess we filed that now 3 times. But you get far more from that than you could ever get from a tax return. But when you're under audit, and I'm on a very continuous audit because there are so many companies, and it is a very big company, far bigger than you would even understand. But it's a great company, but it's big, and it's complex, and it's probably feet high. It's a very complex instrument, and I think that people wouldn't understand it. But if I were finished with the audit, I would have an open mind to it. I would say that, but I don't want to do it during the audit. And really, no lawyer, even from the other side, they say often, not always, but when you're under audit, you don't subject it to that. You get it done, and then you release it. So when that happens, if that happens, I would certainly have an open mind to it.
So that means if the audit is still on, you will not turn over the tax returns, or you'll fight to block it?
When it's under audit, no, nobody would. Nobody turns over a return when it's under audit. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, please.
One, I was tempted to ask you why you like Oprah so much, but I think I'll go on to the question that...
why do I like Oprah? What kind of a question is it?
Yeah, just asking. Just curious. But the real question...
He's a comedian here.
The real question is...
I do like Oprah, by the way. I do. She was a person I knew well, came to my place in Palm Beach often, and I have a lot of respect for her. Unfortunately, she didn't do the trick.
The real question is, you just sat up here and said that from this podium that are you offering an my way or highway scenario to the Democrats? You're saying that if they start investigating you, that you can play that game and investigate
better than them.
Can you compartmentalize that?
And I think I know more than they know.
Can you compartmentalize that and still continue to work with them for the benefit of the rest of the country?
No.
Or are all bets off?
No. If they do that, then it's just all it is a warlike posture.
And so then, wait a minute, then the follow-up...
You heard my answer. Go ahead.
Well, since it's Jim, I'll let it go.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to challenge you on one of the statements that you made in the tail end of the campaign in the midterms.
Here we go.
If you don't mind, Mr. President, that this caravan was an invasion. As you know, Mr. President,
I consider it to be an invasion.
As you know, Mr. President, the caravan was not an invasion. It's a group of migrants moving up from Central America towards the border with the U.S.
Thank you for telling me that.
Why did you characterize it as such?
Because I consider it an invasion. You and I have a difference of opinion.
But do you think that you demonized immigrants in this election to try to keep...
I want them to come into the country, but they have to come in legally. You know, they have to come in, Jim, through a process. I want it to be a process. And I want people to come in, and we need the people.
But your campaign...
Wait. You know why we need the people, don't you? Because we have hundreds of companies moving in. We need the people.
But your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true. But they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood. Right. These were people. This was an actual, it happened a few days ago. And
they're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have...
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his butt.
Well, I'm not
like
a big fan of yours either, so
I understand.
To be honest.
So let me ask you a question if I can. You repeatedly said...
You aren't the best.
Mr. President, you repeatedly, over the course of...
Okay, just sit down, please. Well, when you report fake news, when you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
Mr. President, over the course of the last several days of the campaign, sir, at the end of the campaign, you repeatedly said that Americans need to fear Democrats. You said Democrats would unleash a wave of violent crime that endangers families everywhere. Why are you pitting Americans? Why are you pitting Americans against one another, sir?
Peter, what are you trying to be him?
No,
Peter,
I'm just asking the question.
Let me just tell you. Very simple. because they're very weak on crime, because they have often suggested, members and people within the Democrat Party at a high level have suggested getting rid of ICE, getting rid of law enforcement. That's not going to happen, okay? We want to be strong on the borders. We want to be strong on law enforcement, and I want to cherish ICE because ICE does a fantastic job. So what they do for us is it's so unrecognized how good a job they do. So we want to take care of them, and we want to hold them very close because they do a good job.
But the question,
okay,
to be clear, though, the question,
Thank you very much.
Why are you
sit down? Please.
But you didn't answer my question. Just very simply, the question is, why are you pitting Americans against one another, sir?
I'm not.
Is that how you view citizens of this country?
I'll tell you what. We won a lot of elections last night. We did very well last night.
But in many ways,
I think it's going to have a very positive impact. I watched NBC this morning. They didn't report it exactly correctly, but that's, that's the fact with NBC. Nothing I can do about that. But I want this country to have protection. We want security in our country. I want security, Peter. I mean, you maybe don't think it's so important. And I think when you don't have it, you are indeed unleashing crime. I feel that.
You said you would sign an executive order on birthright citizenship. Are you still going to sign the executive order on birthright citizenship?
You'll ask me that question a little bit later. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, sure.
Thank you, Mr. President. The investigation by the special counsel Robert Mueller has been going on since last spring. It's been over your head.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been over your head, over Republicans' head, during the midterms as well. Is this an opportunity for you, Mr. President, to end that investigation? Would you consider removing Mr. Mueller from his position? I
could have ended it any time I wanted. I didn't. And there was no collusion. There was no anything. I didn't. They went after hackers in Moscow. I don't know about that. They went after people with tax problems from years ago. They went after people with loans and other things. Had nothing to do with my campaign. This is a investigation where many, many millions of dollars has been spent, and there's no collusion. It was supposed to be on collusion. There's no collusion, and I think it's very bad for our country. I will tell you. I think it's a shame. And a poll came out today, by the way, from NBC, or at least I saw it on NBC, where a majority of the people do not agree with the Mueller investigation, or it wasn't approved. They have approval and disapproval, and it had a much higher disapproval. It should end, because it's very bad for our country.
So if it's bad...
And I'm not just talking about the tremendous expense. And the other thing is they should look at the other side also. They only look at one side. They're not looking at all of the things that came up during this investigation. They don't do that. They should also get people that can be fair, not 13 or 14 or 17. I call them the angry Democrats. They are angry people. And it's a very unfair thing for this country. It's a very, very, forget about unfair to me, it's very bad for our country.
Okay. So, Mr. President, if it's
Go ahead.
Mr. President, just wait this moment. If it's unfair to the country and it's costing millions of dollars, why don't you just
give him the mic, please? I've answered the question. Okay. Go ahead, take the Well, I'll give you voters. I will give you voter suppression. You just have to sit down, please. Sit down. I didn't call you. I didn't call you. I didn't call you. I'll give you voter suppression. Take a look at the CNN polls, how inaccurate they were. That's called voter suppression. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm not responding. I'm responding to... Excuse me. I'm not responding to you. I'm talking to this gentleman. Will you please sit down? Excuse me. Would you please sit down? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now that the House of Representatives
very hostile. It's such a hostile media. It's so sad. You asked me about... No, you rudely interrupted him. You rudely interrupted him. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do your demands remain the same to the United States Congress on immigration in exchange for a DACA fix, in exchange for an amnesty for 1.7 million? Are you willing to change any of those demands that you gave to Congress earlier?
I think we could really do something having to do with DACA. And what really happened with DACA, we could have done some pretty good work on DACA, but a judge ruled that DACA was okay. Had the judge not ruled that way, I think we would have made a deal. Once the judge ruled that way, the Democrats didn't want to talk anymore. So we'll see how it works out at the Supreme Court.
Do you still...
Go ahead. From where? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Which group? Where do you want me to take a question from?
Yeah.
Go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead. Take the. Oh, either one. Either one.
Okay.
Or both. Are you together? Go ahead.
We're not together. Mr. President, how do you respond to critics who say that your message on the campaign towards minorities have been polarizing?
I don't think it has been at all.
But is the election of two Muslim women, one of them is veiled to the House, which is making history. Is this a rebuke of this message, do you think?
I don't understand what you're saying. What?
But is it a rebuke of this message? Do you think that this is more reflective of multi-ethnic and multicultural America?
Well, that question, I can only say this. You look at the employment and unemployment numbers for African Americans, for Asian Americans, for Hispanic Americans, they're at a historic high. A poll came out recently where my numbers with Hispanics and with African Americans are the highest, the best they've ever been. That took place 2 or 3 days ago, the poll. I have the best numbers with African American and Hispanic American that I've ever had before. Then you saw the same poll. So I can't say that. I can say this. You look at median income, you look at all of the employment and unemployment numbers, they're doing the best they've ever done. And it reflects, it really is very reflective in the polls. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, I'm from Brooklyn, so you'll understand me.
I understand you very well.
My question is on health care. How is it possible to keep premiums down and cover pre-existing conditions without the individual mandate to fund it?
Well, first of all, what we're doing, and if you look at the Department of Labor, also Secretary Azar, what they've done, they've come up with some incredible health care plans, which is causing great competition and driving the prices right down. But we are getting rid of the individual mandate because it was very unfair to a lot of people. But at the same time, we're covering the people that need it. But the individual mandate was a disaster because people that couldn't necessarily afford it were having to pay for the privilege of not having to pay for health care, and it was bad health care at that. So we are working many plans for health care. We're creating tremendous competition. We had Obamacare repealed and replaced. Unfortunately, one person changed his mind at the last moment, and we had no Democrat support. I have to say that. We didn't have one vote. We would have repealed it, replaced it. We would have had a large-scale, very good health care plan. Now we're doing it a different way. We're doing it a different way. But getting rid of the individual mandate is a very, very popular thing and a very important thing, and people very much appreciate it. Go ahead. No, that's enough. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. 2 questions. One, I know you went through the results, and you obviously studied them late last night. What lesson did you learn most from looking at those results? Was there one thing that, as you kind of reviewed them, that you'll change your strategy, not just for Congress, but kind of going forward? And then just a follow-up question.
Well, I think the results that I've learned and maybe confirmed, I think people like me. I think people like the job I'm doing, frankly. Because if you look at every place I went to do a rally, I couldn't do it with everybody. And it was very hard to do it with people in Congress because there's just too many, there would be too many stops. But I did it with the Senate. I did it with Andy Barr, as you know. And he won. He won a very tough race against McGrath. I was a very, very tough race in Kentucky, and he was down quite a bit, and I went there, and we had a tremendous, very successful, some of you were at that rally, and he won that race. But I could only do that so much because there are just so many players involved. But I did focus on the Senate, and we had tremendous success with the Senate, really tremendous.
Can I ask you one more question? Sorry, Mr. President, one more question, if you don't mind. I'm so sorry, sir. It's a rare opportunity. A lot of people are going to be rushing to Iowa, rushing to New Hampshire. You know that the Democrats are already looking ahead to 2020. Do you want to lock down your ticket right now, sir? Will the vice president be your running mate in 2020?
Well, I haven't asked him, but I hope so. Where are you? Mike, will you be my running mate? Stand up, Mike, please. Raise your right hand. No, I'm only kidding. Will you? Thank you. Okay, good. The answer is yes. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
That was unexpected, but I feel very fine. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Going back to the Russia investigation and the potential investigations from the now Democratic majority in Congress, some say that you could stop all this by declassifying.
I could fire everybody right now.